in the Death Clock campaign, I had somebody steal Joe's coin purse. I had him roll an intelligence check. I had a thief roll a pickpocket check. Thief made his, Joe failed his. And I say, later on, you reach to pay for your drinks and your money's gone. Motherfucker. He got up. He's like, can you pay for... He told the party to pay for his drinks. We're going to go kick some heads in. They went down there. They went to the Undercity. They were like, we're going to find the Thieves Guild. We're going to find the motherfucker stole my coin purse. And he's like, it's very distinctive because Lord Vane carries a very distinctive coin purse. It's a velvet coin purse with a big V on it. So, like, if anyone's seen this shit... So, like, they were going like fucking Miami Vice, you know, going through the Undercity of the, you know, just hassling innocent people, like throwing, they're like, anyone seen this coin purse? Throwing the guys they perceive to be thieves against the wall. Have you seen my coin purse? Just going ridiculous, you know. So sure enough, eventually, some halflings, and this is where they started to hate halflings, a gang of halflings I called thug halflings, flagged them down, and they said, yeah, we've seen it. We've seen it. We know the guy. He's been flashing the money around. You had a lot of money in there. What was it, like 55 gold pieces? He's like 60, and they're like, yeah, dude. They didn't say dude, but they're like, yeah. There was this guy at this opium house. He's been flashing this money around like crazy, and it's a red velvet bag, right, with a V. And Joe's like, yes, it is. Take me to this place at once. So, you know, the halflings, they can you see the problem building up here? The halflings lead him through some alleys, and they point over there, and they goes, in there. We're not going to go there because it's dangerous. And Joe's like, I eat danger for breakfast. And so he walks down the alley right into an ambush. And I just saw the look of utter hatred on their face when some assholes had the sheer unadulterated balls to steal their stuff that they had rightfully stolen. That shit was not going to stand. And then from there, I just kind of progressively scaled it back to see what was the minimum I could do to steal their shit. This is the story of probably the worst thing I've ever done to anybody. Probably ever. Somehow, this pizza had stayed wedged under the toilet for over a month. I'm sitting on the shitter, holding a pizza, a month-old pizza, and then I wonder, like, who left a pizza here? Why would you leave a pizza here? This pizza looked perfect. It looked good enough to eat. And that's when I started having the evil thoughts. Big Mike gets up and he sees the pizza. And he goes, whose pizza's this? And nobody, I'm sitting there going, and he goes, whose pizza is this? And nobody's going, I don't know. And so he looks at the pizza and he goes, well, does anyone care if I have a piece? And I go, it's fine with me, but I think it's been there a while. And he goes, oh, it's fine. Picks it up and he puts it in his mouth, and he sinks his teeth into this thing, and he puts the fucking, and then he bites, and like I said, like a tortilla chip, this piece of pizza pops, crack. It cracks off in his mouth like it was a saltine cracker. He's like, and he knows immediately something's wrong, but he's already kind of started shuffling this piece of this just out of habit. He takes a bite and he uses his tongue to kind of like flick it to the back of his mouth so he can start chewing it. So like he's like crack, and he knows something is wrong because what I'm looking at, and I'm like,
masturbating to thoughts of anyone you do not know on a deep spiritual or intellectual level is the purest evil there is. Unless you're a woman rubbing one off to images of David Beckham. Which brings me to the other half of the sexual objectification equation. You know, the one feminists have never heard of or thought about because they're too busy admiring their own vaginas, in a completely non-objectifying way, unlike you disgusting men who are only interested in sex. Pigs. And while it might suck to be objectified based on your looks, when your looks aren't something you can easily change, it must also suck to be objectified based on how much you bring to the table in performance standards, essentially objectified based on your utility to a given woman. If women are objectified as ornaments, then men are objectified as appliances. And the difference between an ornament and an appliance is that ornaments are coveted objects prone to theft by the unworthy, while appliances that no one wants get hauled to the dump. A woman objectified by the wrong man feels uneasy because once upon a time her reproductive costs and risks would cost her everything, while a man objectified by a woman was actually deferring his disposability. In this reality, in this environment, with women's fertility on total lockdown if they so desire, and men facing legally enforceable $100,000 baby mortgages when they have an oops, our instincts are actually diametrically opposed to our current relative risks and costs. And all this female kvetching over a few appreciative glances, or the thought that a guy you wouldn't have anything to do with might be jerking off with an image of your tits in his mind, it all needs to stop. If feminism wants women to be taken as seriously as men's equals, then it's women who are going to have to do the adjusting for a change. And that means not calling for her smelling salts whenever some guy tells her she's pretty.
Do fundies really believe that atheists say to themselves, God will send me to hell if I sin, but I don't want to stop sinning. How can I get around this? I know. I'll just say that God doesn't exist. The reason I see the notion of God, or at the very least the Abrahamic notion of God, as being nonsensical, is because properties which are ascribed to him seem to either be outright unintelligible or mutually contradictory. One pair of attributes that seem to me to be contradictory are omnipotence and omnibenevolence, or perfect goodness. If God can't do evil because he is good by nature, then his nature constrains his capabilities and he is therefore not omnipotent. But if God could do evil things, then God is potentially evil. And if a being is potentially evil, it is not perfectly good, even if it never actually does evil. Another attribute of God that makes no sense to me is the claim that God is spaceless and timeless. To say that God can exist spacelessly and timelessly seems to me to be the same as saying that God can exist nowhere and never. If God created space-time of his own free will, then he must be capable of existing in the absence of space-time. That makes no sense to me. I don't know what it means for something to exist in the absence of space-time, or at the very least some kind of extension through some kind of dimension. But I am especially confused by the idea that a conscious mind can exist without space-time. A conscious mind is always in motion, it's always in flux. I don't know how something which is completely static could be considered a conscious mind. Consciousness is a process, it's an event. If God is timeless, and some would also say changeless, then I don't know what it would mean for God to be a conscious mind. A changeless conscious mind is inconceivable to me. William Lane Craig once said that matter and energy cannot exist timelessly like God can because matter and energy are never quiescent. Matter and energy never stop moving and changing, therefore they cannot be timeless. But as theoretical bullshit pointed out, a conscious mind is never quiescent either, and I can't conceive of a conscious mind that is quiescent. That seems like a contradiction to me. I see no conceptual difference between a quiescent mind and an unconscious one. If the fact that matter and energy are never quiescent means that matter and energy cannot be timeless, then a conscious mind also cannot be timeless.
Observation 1. Civilization is a monument to science. It influences every aspect of your life. Indeed, it's the causal agent that has on average tripled your life expectancy. Observation 2. That knowledge is gained by scientists performing research and publishing their work for other scientists to scrutinize. Publications are a way by which we can measure the growth of knowledge. Observation 3. About 1/5 of the world's population are Islamic. That's about 1.5 billion people. Observation 4. The entire Islamic world produces only about 1% of the world's scientific papers. Indeed, back in 2005, the entire Arab world had a smaller research footprint than Harvard.
Ideas do not have a face. You cannot intimidate an idea. They don't feel, they don't bleed, they don't die. Indeed, an incontrovertible idea is a most formidable concept. Malice may attack it, ignorance may deride it, but in the end, there it is.
The battle for the future world over say things, whether it'll be more or less religious, is going to be determined by the quality and coherence of the arguments the various sides can put forward today.
Nobody should be that wealthy and nobody should be that poor on this planet. You know, I find it interesting, all these religious people that talk about things, they need to remember Jesus, the person they follow. Jesus went to the poor people. Jesus stayed with the poor people. Jesus let you believe that being poor was not bad. But I think it's a sickness. I think that becoming that wealthy almost becomes like drug addiction. They continue to want more, more, and more. It must be a sickness. It must be like the sickness I have when I play golf. Now you're gonna look and say, Jesse, Jesse Ventura, how can you compare that to golf? Well, I have a sickness in golf. It's called ball hawking. I can't play golf without looking for lost golf balls. I don't need them. I got enough golf balls that I could lose them every time I play and play till I die and I'll never run out. Yet I still have that inner quest inside me to get more. And I think that's what's wrong with these 1%ers. They have so much money, they couldn't spend it in their lifetime or their grandchildren's lifetime. These people with their billions of dollars have to realize it's the people that work at minimum wage that make them as wealthy as they are. I mean, take the Walton family. How pathetic is it that people that work at Walmart have to be on welfare? That they can't even give them a living wage. What, is it gonna hurt the Walton family to make $1 million or $2 million less this year? They're gonna miss a meal? They might not be able to take the summer vacation trip they've all been waiting for? Bullshit. These guys got more money than you could spend in 10 lifetimes. Like I said, it's a sickness. It has to be. It's gotta be a mental sickness. If you look at Jesus then, if he didn't father a child and if he had no relationships with women, he was only surrounded by the 12 disciples, huh? And he was 33 years old when he died? 12 disciples, all men? That sounds a little gay to me. Of course, I could be wrong on that, of course, but they're telling us that he didn't have sex with women and the Da Vinci Code ain't true. Well, then is the other true? I don't know. Just don't seem to be that many women around. It was 12 guys. Kind of like a locker room, huh? Here's another scenario. Think of this, Alex. If 10% of the world is gay and there were 12 disciples plus Jesus, that's a total of 13. That means one of them had to be. When they form these commissions, like the Warren Commission and the 9/11 Commission, they are there simply to rubber stamp the government's official position. They are not there to investigate. They've already got a predetermined conclusion, and they don't let anything stray from that, and they won't entertain any other evidence that doesn't formulate to that conclusion.
To get protons to stick together, they need high heat and pressures. So why wasn't there enough pressure to create anything heavier than hydrogen and helium in whatever started the Big Bang?
Ooh, snap!
Yeah, this guy has done some thinking here.
Ooh.
I like it.
Ooh. Okay, so good one. So at the beginning of the universe, he knows that the conditions were just right to not only forge matter out of energy, this is where you get your protons that are the nuclei of hydrogen. Hydrogen is the simplest element. That's the one that was up in the corner of the periodic table.
Exactly.
The whole periodic table begins there.
Yeah, right there.
Right there.
Yeah.
One proton.
The first step.
The first step. And helium has 2 protons, and lithium has 3 protons, and it goes on and on and on. Carbon has 6 protons. Everybody's got a unique number of protons, and that's the identity of the element. So here we start with hydrogen. We take protons, slam them together, we make helium. Okay. So why don't we keep making other elements in the early universe? We do a little bit of lithium is made, trace amounts.
And that's because the universe at that time was a little depressing. And so, need a little lithium.
They said, we need some, let's make some of that.
Make some lithium.
Some of that, right. So watch what happens. While the universe under high temperatures could have been making heavier elements, it is also expanding,
right,
becoming less dense. And as your density drops, the likelihood of particles colliding goes down.
Exactly. It's the difference between living in New York City and living in rural Kansas. Your chances of having an accident go way down when you're in rural Kansas.
Well, the chances of walking into someone by accident.
That's what I mean.
Okay.
Right. Colliding. A collision accident.
A collision of any kind, in principle. But
Thank
yes. So yes. And so while the universe is expanding, matter is not only becoming less dense, it's also cooling. And so the speeds of these particles drop.
Gotcha.
And so, in fact, you can look at how much hydrogen and helium is in the universe, in parts of the universe that have not been altered severely, and go back and deduce what those conditions must have been. At the same time, you can go back and derive these from first principles, and those two calculations match up.
Gotcha.
And so that's why we have very high confidence in what was going on in the early universe.
Nice.
Yeah. And whereas in a star, you make your hydrogen, you have your helium, and you just keep going up the chain, and you are hot, you are dense. The stuff doesn't get less dense down there. It gets even more dense.
Right.
You're good. Good to go.
See? So, okay, man, that's great.
Yeah, I said it gets more dense. It's there contained, whereas the universe is expanding and cooling.
Right.
That's the difference. Great question.
That is a great question. Way to go, James Brown.
James Brown. Give me another.
Your rights end when you're imposing on other people's rights. So if you're walking up to a woman and say, hey, move, I can't be near you because of my religion, so get the fuck in the back of the plane. Whoa, no, that's not within your rights, because now you're violating her rights. Telling her to do shit because your metaphysical, superstitious nonsense disagrees with it? Fuck off. What are you talking about here? So, look, I get it, man. You can believe whatever stupid little nonsense story about a man living to age 900 and getting mosquitoes to fuck on a boat. Whatever you want to believe, you could believe. That's fine, as long as it's not affecting other people. But if you're affecting other people, now all of a sudden you're in my territory and you cross a line, and you're going to have to fall the fuck back. We spend more on our military than the next 12 countries combined, and you didn't even acknowledge it. You didn't even say, oh, okay, that's interesting. I never saw that before. Wow, that's fascinating. No, you just glossed right the fuck over it. As if he wasn't shown anything. As if there wasn't anything that was, like, of substance in front of him. He just... That's childish. Why is it childish? What are you talking about? And also, Mar made another great point. He said, I thought you're this, conservative guy who believes in free markets and believes in small government. This is the biggest fucking government imaginable. This is all socialism. It's childish. It's childish. How are you supposed to get it through this guy's thick head? And he doesn't understand that he's a fucking massive hypocrite, too. Okay? Because if we are supposed to get involved in every place in the world that has a problem, for fuck's sake, man, we'd have to get involved in the Congo, where they're on the verge of a genocide right now, if not engaged in one. It's a religious war. Try to explain to some, 22-year-old kid from Arkansas why he should give his life for people in the Congo. We'd have to go to Syria, of course. We'd have to go to North Korea. We'd have to go to Mali, which is basically Al-Qaeda right now. We'd have to go to Burma, which is a military dictatorship. And actually, they're our business partners, so we look the other way while they do fucked up shit. We'd have to go to Saudi Arabia, which is a Muslim theocracy where women have absolutely no rights. They can't show their face. They can't drive. But since we do oil business with them, we don't talk about them being bad? No. We don't care about democracy if the dictatorships are helping us, helping our corporations. Then it doesn't matter that they're a dictatorship. We don't bring them up as a problem, even though they are a problem. The way that reason and logic and rationality works is you have to let the evidence build upon itself until it comes to its own conclusion. And then you go, oh, okay, I see how it works. The Bible has to be true because I believe it, and therefore I'm going to go out there, and when Bill Maher points out absurdities in the Bible, I'm going to do this little tap dance and say, no, let me tell you why that doesn't make sense and why you're wrong and why the Bible's still the literal word of God. the rules of logic don't apply to the conversation when we're talking about God. Well, isn't that fucking convenient? Then the whole conversation is useless anyway. Because no matter what we say, no matter what we point out to you, no matter what evidence or proof there is, no matter how much we use logic or reason or rationality, you're going to do the tap dance and you're going to say, no, I'm still right because I'm right, and I don't care about all the things that you're pointing out. Well, silly people talk like that. Anybody who refuses to take endless amounts of Wall Street cash and donations from special interests, oh, they're not a serious candidate because they couldn't raise $1 billion and sell themselves out like whores. The mainstream media should be ashamed of itself because the whole idea of a free press is that you're supposed to be a check on power, a check on the government. So if you have a political candidate that comes along and says all the right things and falls in line with public opinion, you should point that out and you should talk about it like it's an amazing thing, but you don't. Because again, if your job is to be the watchdog of the government for the American people, if that's the job of the press, you should be leading the way, saying this provision is unacceptable, it screws over the American people, and you need to stop it immediately. This isn't debatable, this isn't a question, it's clear that this comes about through corruption. It's clear that this comes about because the people on Wall Street are paying the politicians, the lobbyists are paying the politicians, so they do their bidding. That's the problem. There are plenty of extremists in America, these far-right lunatics, who they've just decided in their own minds, this is my country. This is for white conservative Protestants. That's it. That's it. If you're anybody else, especially if you're a Muslim or if you're a black person, get the fuck out of here. You're not American because I decide what's American. Well, no, you don't. You might want to read the Constitution. You might want to read our founding documents. You might want to understand the principle of equality and freedom and justice that this country is now built on and now stands on. You might want to learn a thing or two about the civil rights movement. You might want to understand the concept of multiculturalism. You could try to pretend like this country is supposed to be xenophobic and myopic and racist, but that's only in your backwards, uneducated, ignorant mind. So again, the irony here is you're the ones that are fighting American values. They are standing up for them. I don't know what happens when I die, neither do you. Next question. Oh, you're going to pretend like you do? Well, you're a liar. How about that? You don't know, you're making shit up. How about that? Hey, why don't you guys join my team, the team of we admit we don't know when we don't know, and we're not delaying gratification to the next life, which there's no evidence it exists. We want you to be happy and fulfilled and successful on this earth, and that's what we fight for, making this earth as good a place as we possibly can. We're going to win that debate all day long. That's why these numbers are rising.
The claims of Christianity do not reflect reality. How do you defend this idea that God chose the books of the Bible? Because at the Synod of Hippo, they were making a decision on which books to include and which books to exclude. And this decision was made by men. And then we just come back to a matter of faith. You really can't give me a tangible reason why these books should be regarded as the Word of God. But I'm pretty sure the gazelle, if it has any kind of concept of good and evil, it regards the lion as evil. You know what I mean? To the mouse, the cat is evil. To the cat, the dog is evil. You might say to me, well, why don't you go out and kill people and rape women and steal things and do all kinds of stuff like that? Well, I have a mind that is capable of looking at the world around me, desiring a certain kind of world, recognizing that I have a certain kind of nature within me, and acting accordingly. So I ask myself, what kind of world do I desire? Do I want a world where the land around me is populated by bandits and I have to carry a gun around all the time, and the seas are populated by pirates? No, we've moved past that kind of world to a world that's somewhat better. And we want to keep the one we have rather than go backwards. You see? We act because we want to create or maintain a certain kind of world. So it stands to reason that we behave ourselves in a certain kind of way. We make rules for ourselves depending on what outcome we want to achieve. That is a perfectly meaningful basis for morality. But the theology was really only developed by Paul. You have to read a lot of the writings of Paul where he draws all the significance out of what Jesus' death actually meant. the argument from prophecy doesn't seem to be a very good one, and even other prophecies like the one in Micah where it says that the Messiah would come from Bethlehem. There's no real historical evidence to say that Jesus came from Bethlehem. He appears to have been a Nazarene, born in Nazareth. Now, there is a story in the Bible about a census that was taken that required Mary and Joseph to travel to their place of birth, which was Bethlehem. She was pregnant at the time, and she happened to give birth to Jesus while they were in Bethlehem. So that allowed him to be born in Bethlehem, but still be a Nazarene from Nazareth. You know, and that was a very odd census, being called back to the place of your birth or whatever it was. Yeah. And it's not, of course, it's not backed up by secular history at all. So we just have a story in a religious document telling us that this thing really happened. So you can write the fulfillment of a prophecy. It's not that it actually, because you read it in this book and then you look backwards to a book that was written 1,000 years or whatever beforehand, that it was a fulfillment of the prophecy. It could be just something that someone wrote in order to fulfill a prophecy. And in fact, this thing does occur in the apocryphal writings of the New Testament. I did read a passage from Pseudo-Matthew, which is an apocryphal infancy gospel about Jesus, where it talks about how Mary and Jesus, when he was a boy, Mary and Jesus went to Egypt, and the idols all prostrated themselves before him, like they recognized that this was the Messiah. Like all the stone idols fell apart. And it says in the text that this was a fulfillment of something from Isaiah verse whatever. I can't remember the exact verse. But of course, this is in the Apocrypha. This is in the non-historical apocryphal writings. You've got backwards pointing to prophecies that are now being fulfilled, but they're not being fulfilled. The fulfillment of the prophecies is being invented, written down as fiction. Now that's verifiable. So why should I believe that the claims in the four Gospels really happened? Particularly the resurrection. Is there a good reason to believe this? No. You're thinking that I don't ever really commit to believing anything, but I do. I commit fully to whatever I think is the truth. But I also recognize that I can be wrong. And when I recognize that I can be wrong, I have to be open to change. And hey, this also means, could I be wrong in my assessment of Christianity? It doesn't seem likely, but I have to say, yes. And if I'm wrong, I'll change my mind and I'll become a Christian again. All you have to do is show me that I'm wrong. If there was no fall from grace, there is no need for a Savior. This is a very highly populated universe, and it seems a little bit like hubris to say that it's all about us. It's all about the predicament of one species on one little planet. No, that's just not the universe that we find. So again, that's part of my problem with Christianity, is that you want to get them young as possible, and you want to, get this into them so that hopefully they'll never grow out of it. Whereas my experience, I would be teaching children to question everything, to maintain their own personal opinions, develop their own individual worldview. I don't subscribe to the view that they should believe necessarily what I believe, unless that is the position they come to after much careful thinking. I'm always trying to find the flaws in what I believe, and my means of doing that is to go outside of my comfort zone, to read things that might give me a different angle on things that I already believe. So I've read everything from the writings of Richard Dawkins through to C.S. Lewis, through to Anton LaVey, who's the founder of the Church of Satan, other forms of occultism. I've looked into the Eastern philosophies. I've looked into quantum physics. I want to leave no stone unturned. The rise of Christianity in the early centuries AD. Notice how it took on board elements of paganism. The reason you have a Christmas tree and an Easter egg is all because of paganism. The reason why Jesus' birth is celebrated on the 25th of December is because of paganism. I know you'd like to believe that God spake through his prophets and absolute truth was communicated down to mankind, but that's just not how it was. The greatest trick that Santa ever pulled was convincing the world he did not exist. Oh, he must be real then. Sold. The greatest trick the Tooth Fairy ever pulled was convincing the world she does not exist. You see what I mean? It actually doesn't prove anything. You know, you hear a nice catchphrase and you go, oh, that has a certain thing to it. Because, yeah, I can understand how it would benefit the devil if no one believed he existed. So, yeah, I get it. You know, if no one believes he existed, then he can do his infernal work without anybody detecting him. So his work will be all the more effective.
Do you at least acknowledge that all of the scientific evidence points to an Earth that is vastly older than 6,000 to 10,000 years old?
Yeah, I'm aware of that.
Okay, so how do you reconcile...
It doesn't prove there's no God.
You're right, you're right. Did I say it did? I'm not saying that that proves there's no God. What I'm saying is, here's something we've learned about the universe, and it doesn't match with your literal view of the Bible. Now, there's a conflict there, and we need to resolve that. And some people resolve it in favor of the Bible, saying the Bible's absolutely right, and ignore whatever actual evidence is presented there. I find that to be patently absurd because it turns Christianity into a self-contradictory proposition, which is, and so, by the way, does the entire idea of a revelation in the New Testament. Because your position, to the extent that I understand it, because you haven't got a kind of a straight answer yet, is one where there is a God who has an important message for mankind, and somehow he only reveals it to certain individuals who then write this down, and thousands of years after this initial revelation, we have to rely on copies of translations of copies by anonymous authors with no originals, and a textual testimony to a miracle, for example, the loaves and fishes, there's no amount of reports, anecdotal testimonial reports, that could be sufficient to justify believing that this event actually happened as reported. No amount. And anything that would qualify as a God would clearly understand this, and if it wanted to convey this information to people in a way that was believable, would not be relying on text to do so. And this, for me, is the nail in the coffin for Christianity. The God that Christians believe in is amazingly stupid if it wants to actually achieve its goal of spreading this information to humanity by relying on text, by relying on languages that die off, by relying on anecdotal testimony. That's not a pathway to truth. And anything that would qualify for a God should know this, which means either that God doesn't exist or it doesn't care enough about those people who understand the nature of evidence to actually present it. Now, which of those possibilities do you think is accurate?
I think you do need faith to believe it.
Sure. And why would you believe anything on faith? Faith isn't a pathway to truth. Every religion has some sort of faith. People take things on, you know, if faith is your pathway, you can't distinguish between Christianity, Hinduism, Judaism, any of these others. How is it that you use reason as a path to truth in every endeavor of your life, and then when it comes to the ultimate truth, the most important truth, you're saying that faith is required? And how does that reflect on a God who supposedly exists and wants you to have this information? What kind of God requires faith instead of evidence?
Well, I think you probably have faith about a lot of things too.
Like what? I have reasonable expectations based on evidence. I have trust that has been earned. I will grant trust tentatively. I don't have faith. Faith is the excuse people give for believing something when they don't have evidence. I mean, if you can come up with something that I believe that I don't have evidence for, guess what I'll do? I'll stop believing it. That's the nature of a rational mind. That is the goal. My only goal was to be the best Christian I could be and represent this to people who didn't believe. And what I found, because I actually cared about whether or not my beliefs were true rather than whether they felt good, was that my beliefs weren't justified. Try as I might and pray as hard as I could,
no answer comes, no evidence is forthcoming, and when I talk to people about this, the only answer they ever offer is the one you did, which is, well, you just got to have faith. Well, sorry, I don't. And not only I'm not sorry that I don't, I'm sorry for others that they think that I should have, because faith is not a virtue. Faith is gullibility. It's evidence that determines whether or not your perception of reality is reasonable and in conjunction with the world as it is.
Well, I think church gives a lot of people some community and some values.
Sure. So what? That has no tie to the truth of the supernatural claims. Church religions and churches have tons and tons of benefits for the in-group, and some of them even have benefits for some of the out-groups with, you know, feeding the homeless, although I really wish, as many of the atheists do, we have the Atheists Helping the Homeless group in Austin, where we will actually help the homeless without making them sit through a sermon first. You know, we're not holding their sandwich ransom in the name of Jesus. You can do, there's no good thing that a church or religion does that cannot be achieved by purely secular means. And there's no benefit, positive benefit of churches and religions that necessarily demonstrates the truth of their supernatural claims. People who actually understand what love is, people who actually understand what morality is, people who actually understand reality, it is almost unbearable to watch the people that you love be so absolutely duped into a divisive, hateful religion that they think is not divisive, they think it's inclusive, and they think it's positive. It kills me, and it's one of the reasons that I do this. Because I, for 25 plus years, believed this stuff. I am so happy that I no longer think that my former roommate is destined for hell. I am so happy that despite the fact that my relationship with my parents, the nature of it has changed, I don't have to worry about them. The division is entirely one-sided. I didn't end relationships when I became an atheist. Christians ended those relationships, and it was because their particular religion cannot tolerate. I had letters from people who said, we can no longer associate with you, you are of the devil. Now, it's possible that they're right. It's possible, I don't know under what circumstances, but the only way that you could demonstrate that is with reason and evidence and not faith. And I don't know how we can fix a world where people have been so convinced that they are doing the right thing out of compassion and love and trying to help people when it is absolute poison, when it is absolutely destructive. I wish everybody could go through what I went through so they could have a proper understanding of, wow, how the heck could I have believed those things that I believed? And how much better life is when you want to deal with reality on reality's terms. I mean, I know that we didn't give you a huge opportunity to express your views, but every time I asked, I got kind of a dance. And I'm happy to have you call back in, but if your whole position is that the foundation of your belief is necessarily dependent on faith, then we got nothing to talk about. Because I don't think that that's a good thing, and until you demonstrate that faith is a good thing, how could you possibly convince somebody? And by the way, how do you go about demonstrating that faith is a good thing without evidence? It all comes back to reason and evidence.
I think he's gone again.
All right. I was going to give him the last word.
The economic system that we live in is a parasitic paradigm that is only going to lead to self-destruction. But people don't see that. So if you attack the economic system for what it actually is, everyone's feathers go up. Everyone says, well, wait a minute, this is the world we all live. We live in a profit-based, labor-for-income world, cyclical consumption. This is what we're used to. We understand we have division of classes. You know, they throw in human nature. They throw in everything that will try to make it seem like it's a part of the natural order of reality when it in fact is not. The self-appointed guardians of the status quo are birthed in religion, birthed in economics, birthed in the illusion of democracy that we see today across the world, birthed in the various isms that are entirely pointless: capitalism, communism, fascism, socialism. You have the priesthood of the monetary system, the capitalists, if you will. You can give it that rhetoric. I don't use that word. It's meaningless. The monetarism is the word I use. The pretense for acquisition of money is based on differential advantage, which is based on dishonesty, period. Then you have the priesthood of religious concepts, religious identification, and the idea that somehow we know everything already and there's a God, and he's looking down on us, controlling everything. I won't even go into the paradoxes that come from that extremely narrow notion. So in other words, the biggest crutch to the evolution of human thought is breaking your own indoctrination. It's very, very difficult to overcome emotional elements that have become so ingrained in you that you have an immediate reaction, an immediate suffering and pain when anything interferes with that. And it's a very, very complex problem. But I'll say it again. We have to learn how to we have to learn how to identify and break our own indoctrination if we expect to move forward at all as a civilization. There's really nothing anyone needs to know about economics than the fact that the entire global economic system is based upon people constantly consuming, irregardless of the state of affairs and natural orders of energy, planetary materials, and anything else. It is blind, narrow consumption with absolutely no regard for the environment. How many times do you hear the President of the United States say, "God bless America"? What an offensive, insulting thing to say to the American people. First of all, it's offensive to every other country in the world. Why would God just bless America? God would bless the planet if we lived in a sane society, if there was a God, of course. I think Jacques Fresco put it best on Larry King. When Larry King asked him, "What do you think about Christianity?" he said, "I think it's great. When are they going to put it into practice?" In the end, my disposition on religion is very, very simple. It's nothing but a bunch of stories. They're allegories that have meaning. They get distorted through interpretations because that's the nature of semantics. But I don't want to rule out religion. I don't think religion should be outlawed or anything like that. I think it should be understood for what it is. The Catholic Church and a lot of other religions that feed off of those early Old Testament ideologies, they advocate this illusion that we can just procreate constantly and everyone's going to be fine. God will take care of everyone. Humanity has to start thinking about its relationship to the earth. Until it does so, we're fucking doomed. Humanity cannot survive in a paradigm that requires infinite growth, which again is what it's based on. If you're not familiar with that, think about it. All we do is buy and consume and consume and consume. That's what makes the economy go. If people stop buying, the GDP of all countries goes down. Well, the more we buy, consume, and waste our resources, the faster we extinguish ourselves. What do you do? What do you do? How do you stop this? This is why the Zeitgeist movement exists. We have to, one, get a philosophical disposition under our belts that says, you know what, we're all on the same page. We all have to survive on this planet. We are faced with some tremendous problems, and the only way they're going to be resolved is to begin to work together. Everyone needs to shed their religious ideas. They need to shed their capitalist, socialist, fascist, communist pre-constructs. They need to shed everything that they have been taught and ask themselves one simple question. What the fuck do we need to continue our survival on this planet? Every resource on the planet should be common heritage to all human beings. There's no way to create a stable society otherwise. So when you're born on this planet, you inherit the planet. The planet is your home, not some plot of land that is, has the illusion of property, not some house that you think you own. There's no such thing as ownership. The idea of ownership is controlled restriction. Ownership is simply there really for those at the top to make sure no one can interfere with the fact that they control mostly everything. A resource-based economy attempts to remove all of the unsustainable practices that we have now and create a holistic system of resource management, of priority of labor. That's a big one. Think about how much time is wasted in most people's lives on jobs that do absolutely nothing. Think about how much energy is wasted by someone who works at Wall Street driving from Pennsylvania every single day from their home so they can be a trader on Wall Street, wasting energy on something that means nothing, that wastes even more electricity and energy. When you begin to think like that, when you begin to see how much energy and resources are wasted on actions that have no return whatsoever except the self-interest and consumeristic monetary values of particular individuals, but return nothing to society. Think about how beautiful society would be when we start to educate people on natural processes of the environment, on science and technology, and resource conservation. And when people engage society in a professional level, if you will, they do so on things that actually matter. That will be cataclysmic. That will be unbelievable to see people doing stuff that actually has a relevance. That will enable them to have so much more freedom too. When I invent something, that is given to everyone for them to improve upon and to utilize. That invention isn't hoarded through patents and trademarks. It's given to everyone. In turn, what that means is that every time anyone else invents something or creates something or has an idea, that comes to me too. Suddenly, humanity becomes a singular organism. It becomes a working system. One way or another, we will end up in a system that's not based on money as we know it today. Why? Because that will be realized in the future by historians as the total and pivotal cause of the destruction of civilization as we know it. That will be understood in the future. Historians will look back and say, holy shit, they were making materials, selling them for corporation profit over and over and over and over again with absolutely no reference to what the planet had and recycling protocols and everything else. They were burning fossil fuels at 1,000,000 times the rate of their actual renewability. They're going to laugh at us, wondering what the hell kind of primitive, dumbass species we actually were, if we even survived to reach that point. So I hate to sound condescending and negative. I hate to throw out all this rhetoric, but I'm fairly irritated at this point, and I try not to be. I just want to make it understood that the entire system that we live in is a sham. It's a false system, falsivity defined by the fact that it cannot be sustained. It's that simple, and we propose a resource-based economy. I hope everyone watching this film will go to www.thezeitgeistmovement.com and understand what we're doing. I hope everyone out there will understand that either we change or we die.